Hi everyone, today's book is called The Day Santa Stopped Believing in Harold. It's by Maureen Fergus and illustrated by Cale Atkinson. And I thought, when I saw the title, I said, I just have to read this because usually it's the other way around. A kid stops believing in Santa, but this time the Santa stops believing in a kid? I just have to read it. Let's find out about this mystery. Here is our front cover. We've got a nice Christmassy pattern. Got a cat and a turtle playing a board game. Here's our title page. One stormy night, very close to Christmas, Santa and Mrs. Claus were sitting in their cozy little cabin at the North Pole. Mrs. Claus was busy mending the seam of Santa's fourth best pair of red velvet pants. Santa was supposed to be going over the roster for this year's sleigh team. Instead, he was moping. What do you think moping means? If you look at Santa, what do you think? Yeah, kind of like pouting. You're unhappy. I wonder why Santa's unhappy in this cozy little cabin. Several times Mrs. Claus asked Santa what was wrong. Each time he muttered, "Nothing," and sighed loudly. Finally, Mrs. Claus said, "Papa, I can't help you if you won't tell me what the problem is." "All right," said Santa with another sigh. "Well, do you know Harold?" Mrs. Claus smiled. "Brown hair, freckles, lost a tooth last week, sometimes forgets to..." "Stop!" interrupted Santa in a choked voice. "Don't say another word. You don't need to keep pretending on my account because I don't believe in Harold anymore." Mrs. Claus stared at Santa as though he'd suddenly sprouted antlers. "What? What do you mean you don't believe in him anymore, Santa?" Oh my. Look, Harold has always been a big part of Christmas, and I like the idea of Harold, explained Santa, but lately I've come to realize that there are a lot of things about Harold that just don't make sense. "Like what?" said Mrs. Claus. "For one thing, I'm pretty sure his mom writes his Santa letters," said Santa. "So what if she does?" said Mrs. Claus. "That doesn't mean anything." "Maybe not," said Santa, "but what about the snack, huh? What about that?" "What about it?" asked Mrs. Claus. "He's saying there's a few things that aren't adding up to me. Firstly, who's writing that Christmas list, and who's making the snacks?" "I think Harold's dad lays out my snack on Christmas Eve," whispered Santa dramatically. "Think about it. Harold is way too small to lift a big carton of milk. He can barely hold his own head up." "Papa, Harold isn't a baby anymore." "Yes, well, that's another thing, isn't it?" said Santa. "That Harold who sat on my knee in the mall last year didn't even look like the real Harold." "Well, yeah, 'cause kids grow up, Santa. They get bigger, right?" "Harold is a real person, Papa," said Mrs. Claus. "Real people look different from year to year." Santa wasn't listening. "You know what's going on here, don't you?" he asked. "Harold's parents are trying to get me to trick me into believing in him." "And just why would they do that?" asked Mrs. Claus. "So Santa thinks Harold's parents are playing a trick on him. Why would they do that?" Good question, Mrs. Claus. "They think that if I know the truth about Harold, Christmas will be ruined for me," cried Santa. "Either that or they want Harold's gifts all for themselves." Ooh, Santa looks really upset now. Mrs. Claus shook her head and said, "You know what you're doing, don't you? You're looking for reasons not to believe in Harold instead of just accepting him as one of the best, most magical parts of Christmas." Santa looked uncomfortable and maybe even a little uncertain. but all he said was, I know what I know. She's saying, you're just looking for things to be wrong, when the truth is Harold is a really important and magical part of Christmas. The terrible news traveled like a spooked Arctic hare. Santa had stopped believing in children. Not all children, Santa assured Merpin, the elf superior in the computer gizmo department. Just Harold. Uh-huh, said Merpin. And you know what else, said Santa? I'm not the only one who doesn't believe in him. My friends don't believe in him either. Mm-hmm, said Merpin. So he's saying, not all kids, just Harold. And you know, my friends don't believe in him either, so, well, he must not be real then. Jack Frost says his mom and dad told him that Harold doesn't exist, and the abominable snow monster says only a baby would believe in Harold. Uh-huh, said Merpin. Merpin doesn't really seem to be really caring about what Santa's saying. Do I look like a baby to you? Boomed Santa. Merpin stared at Santa's twinkling eyes, rosy cheeks, and jiggling jelly belly. Forget I asked, sniffed Santa. I'm going to talk to the reindeer, because he kind of does look like a baby. So he's trying to convince people that Harold's not real, but they're just not falling for it. Let's see what the reindeer think. The reindeer listened carefully to Santa's evidence against the existence of Harold. They whispered among themselves for a few minutes. Finally, Donner said, on one hand, we're not convinced that Harold is real. I knew it, said Santa unhappily. On the other hand, countered Donner, we're not convinced that Harold isn't real. So what are you saying, asked Santa. What we're saying is that you need proof, said Donner, and we think we know just how you can get it. So the reindeer aren't convinced either way. So they're saying, you need to get some proof for this, Santa. Now, strange as it seems, while Santa was up north telling Mrs. Claus and the elves of the reindeer that he didn't think Harold was real, Harold was down south telling his parents and his friends and his turtle that he didn't think Santa was real. Oh, he's got a whole bunch of questioning evidence here about Santa. So now Santa doesn't believe in Harold, and Harold doesn't believe in Santa. Oh no. Deep in his heart, Harold wanted to believe in Santa, but the older Harold got, the harder it was for him to just have faith. What I need is proof, thought Harold, and I think I know just how I can get it. Now they're both trying to get proof that the other either exists or not. And it looks like the dad is laying out milk and cookies for Santa. That doesn't mean Harold doesn't exist. It means Dad's helping, right? At Christmas Eve, Harold hung his stocking, helped out the Santa snack, and hugged his parents goodnight, just like he did every Christmas Eve. On this particular night, however, after his mom and dad had gone to bed, Harold tiptoed back into the front room, and hid behind the armchair across the fireplace. If Santa is real, Harold thought drowsily, I will definitely see him coming. So now he's waiting and waiting for Santa to arrive. Look, he's even got his little pet turtle. Many hours later, Santa and the reindeer touched down on the roof of Harold's house, which Santa had saved for last. Santa's plan was to hide in Harold's front room and see if Harold ran out of his bedroom on Christmas morning. If he did, Santa would know that Harold was real. If he didn't, Harold's parents would have some explaining to do. After settling into his hiding spot, Santa tried to stay awake, but it was extremely warm and cozy in Harold's front room, and Santa was very tired after a hard night's work. Slowly, he closed his sleepy eyes. Oh boy, so now we've got Harold hiding in this room, waiting for Santa, and Santa hiding in another room, waiting for Harold. Oh no. And both of them are very, very tired, and Santa fell asleep. The next thing Santa knew, it was Christmas morning. Too bad we don't know any little boys who like to open some presents from Santa, said Harold's mom, who'd spotted Harold hiding behind the armchair. Aha! thought Santa. Too bad there are no presents from Santa, whispered Harold's father. Oops, thought Santa, who'd forgotten to set out the gifts before hiding. I don't care about presents, said Harold as he slowly stood up. I just wanted to see Santa, and I didn't. At the sound of Harold's voice, Santa's heart gave a wild leap. So, at first, Santa's saying, no, Harold, just the parents. I knew it. And Harold's saying, no gifts. I knew it. No Santa. But now, hearing and seeing Harold, Santa is saying, he is real. Oh my gosh, his heart leaped. You're real, he shouted joyfully as he jumped up from behind the sofa. Harold's mother screamed. Harold's father sprayed coffee everywhere. Harold's face lit up like a Christmas tree. You're real, he shouted, running over to give Santa a hug. Oh, look at how happy they each are. The parents are quite shocked, understandably. But look, Santa says, you're real. Harold says, you're real. Oh my gosh. They're so happy. After Harold and Santa got out of the shock that of finding out each one of them had thought the other one wasn't real, they sat on the floor reading comics, playing with toys, and licking candy canes until the sound of tiny hooves impatiently stomping on the roof reminded Santa that it was time to go home. Oh, look, they spent Christmas morning together. Oh, but now it was time for Santa to go. Goodbye, Harold! Goodbye, Harold's parents, cried Santa as he prepared to magic himself up the chimney. Goodbye, Santa, cried Harold. See you next Christmas morning. Unless you'd rather fall asleep beside someone else's sofa, cried his parents. Santa's big booming laugh rang out once, shaking the halls and knocking over several glass ornaments off the tree. And then, in the wink of an eye, he was gone. The end. There goes Santa. Well, that was a fun book, kind of exploring that, you know what, this Christmas season you might encounter some people who don't believe in Santa and try to give evidence on why Santa might not exist. But just like Santa and Harold, you have to have a little bit of faith, and instead of looking for reasons why Santa might not exist, look for all the wonderful magic that you see all around you each and every Christmas. And I hope you have a very lovely and magical Christmas. Thanks for reading and learning with me. See you soon.